Right, so just the day after Nicaragua surprisingly announced they were taking the UK, Germany, the Netherlands and Canada to The Hague, accused of aiding and abetting in Israel's genocide, now South Africa have declared that they are moving forward with a case against the United States and the United Kingdom for war crime complicity, as they assemble a team of nearly 50 lawyers to take on the two countries arguably the most complicit in Israel's actions against the people of Gaza. Complicity in genocide is a war crime, and as both countries are also signatories to the Genocide Convention, they are also not meeting their obligations under that, in light of the ICJ ruling already having been passed against Israel, which has been soundly ignored all round. So will this action make any difference either? Right, so South Africa are moving forward with their complicity in genocide case against the US and the UK due to the fact both are continuing to supply military aid to the nation despite that initial early ruling against Israel and the provisional measures laid down by the ICJ against the Zionist state in light of their actions going on for 4 months now in Gaza, with more than 100,000 people now dead, missing, presumed dead or injured, with some 11,000 of the dead being children. And I say moving forward with this case because news actually broke in mid-January that South Africa were planning something along these lines, though at that point, of course, there had been no ruling against Israel. Everything was very much focused on that initial ruling against Israel itself. No provisional orders had yet been laid down. And that requirement needed to be met before any case against any prospective cases of complicity in Israel's actions could be brought forward against them as well. Well, January the 26th came, of course, and so it came to pass that those 6 provisional orders were made against Israel, overwhelmingly by the ICJ panel of judges, the notable exception being the representative judge from Uganda, who I will come back to presently because she's relevant again here. Now, this separate lawsuit from the one South Africa brought against Israel had been spearheaded by South African lawyer Wikus van Rensburg and his intention to take the US and UK to court for complicity after the case against Israel brought by his country had its hearing, had been known about for a few weeks now. There have been various stories in foreign media about this, though not here in the UK, of course. What a surprise, I hear you say. Well, indeed. But over the last few weeks, Van Rensburg has been busy. He has to date, in just a matter of weeks really, assembled a collection of some 47 lawyers. Here's an excerpt from the article in the Turkish news outlet Anadolu Agency, who interviewed Van Rensburg on his motivation to do all of this. When he told the people around him about filing a lawsuit, Rensburg said he received a lot of support. Many lawyers decided to join us in the lawsuit. Many of those who have joined are Muslims, but I am not. They feel obligated to assist this cause, but I believe that what is happening is incorrect. What happened in Iraq is an example of this, he said, noting that no one held the US accountable for the crimes it committed in the Middle Eastern country, as the issue was not given the necessary importance. But now people believe what is happening in Palestine is an ideal scenario for the legal process to be carried out, the South African lawyer said, adding that the US is busy spending more money and more resources to allow Israel to commit the crime. No one says stop, enough is enough, he remarked. Rensburg said the genocide case filed by South Africa against Israel at the ICJ will serve as a guide for their case against the US and UK, and that they will begin the process based on the outcome of the case and the steps to be taken by the United Nations. I actually appreciated the mention of Iraq here because, of course, many of us here in this country have looked at the likes of Tony Blair and those in his government who worked with him for years now and have said of Blair particularly, he belongs in The Hague. And yet he's never been brought to book that way. I'm not intentionally trying to shoehorn an attack on Labour into this video particularly, but it is notable that Blair's spin doctor Alistair Campbell has written an article just yesterday that in light of waning support for Keir Starmer's regime, for many understandable reasons, young people apparently need to get off their high horses about Gaza. This is the guy behind the weapons of mass destruction dossier that saw the UK dragged into that Iraq conflict, with all the death and destruction of civilian life and infrastructure we saw then. It doesn't sound like he's learnt one iota, and if he's cheerleading for Starmer, then the opposition party to the current government won't be any better. Anyway, the ICJ genocide case against Israel will serve as a guide, Van Rensburg said. So clearly, at the point this Anadolu article came out, much of what we knew of this complicity case was a watch and wait matter at that point. But of course now they have those initial rulings to go on. Those provisional orders have been passed. And the fact they are not being adhered to strengthen and build a litigation action at the ICJ over. Already Van Rensburg and his team have begun contacting law firms in the US and UK in preparation. Now, this is a case against the US and UK governments, of course, and that means a trip to the International Court of Justice based in The Hague. But another line in the Anadolu article caught my eye, and that states that Van Rensburg's initiative aims to prosecute those who are complicit in the crime in civilian courts in collaboration with lawyers from the US and UK with whom he is already in contact. Now, that isn't in the remit of the ICJ. They prosecute nations, not individuals, as that sentence appears to imply. So there's a far more wide-ranging set of separate litigations against not just the US and UK, but individuals from those countries as well, either at the ICC, International Criminal Court, also in The Hague, or our domestic courts, South Africa's intention too. Certainly sounds that way. They can certainly start with Sunak and Starmer both, can't they? Coming back to the ICJ though, there have been some changes there. As of yesterday, a new president and vice president of the ICJ were elected, and some members stood down with new ones coming in to replace them. The former president, Joan Donoghue, for example, has now ended her time on the ICJ entirely. She's gone. The new president of the ICJ is the Lebanese judge now, Nawaf Salam, which no doubt Israel absolutely hates news of. But they'll be a lot happier with the newly elected vice president, which is now the most infamous judge on the ICJ, because it's Julia Sebutinde of Uganda, the only judge to vote in Israel's favour on each of the 6 provisional orders laid down upon Israel, when even Israel's own judge voted for 2 of those orders. Aside from the American Judge Donoghue and judges from Morocco, Russia and Jamaica having stood down too, with the new judges having been appointed being another American, along with representatives from Mexico, Romania and, just to make things that little bit more interesting, from South Africa as well. With more countries interested in joining the litigation, it seems reasonable to assume that Van Rensburg's ranks of lawyers can only swell, and with Nicaragua also planning their own litigation against the UK, quite possibly with more countries to yet follow suit, I hope this is a sign that the days of not meeting international obligations and turning a blind eye to genocide that just happens to be politically convenient for others are well and truly numbered. Political leaders have to be held to account. We don't need more Tony Blairs. God knows we don't need the one we've got. But we don't need more Tony Blairs getting away with it. He needs to be the exception, not the rule. Nicaragua have set out their stall, and if you'd like the details on that story, you should watch this video here next, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.